Hi, friend. Though we've likely never met in person, I just want to take a moment to thank you for choosing to spend the next hour or two with us. In this age of infinite content, it means a lot that you're choosing our humble podcast feed from among all the other options out there. We care deeply about the content that makes up this podcast, which is why we wanted to create this platform in the first place. We hope that it finds a home in your life as well, and that it inspires and informs your practice on the path. Thanks for being here, and enjoy what follows. For me personally, part of the fun of doing this podcast is meeting a host of Dhamma practitioners so different from myself, and getting a window into their lives and various experiences, which often include unfamiliar environments and cultures. However, that was certainly not the case when talking to Melissa Coates. What happens when you put two native Californians in a room on the other side of the world to discuss the depths of Dhamma practice in the tropics of Southeast Asia? Well, you feel a sense of shared experience and of home, which I enjoyed very much. There was a vibe when talking to Melissa that just felt easy and relaxed, and, well, perhaps it goes to show that you can take the person out of California, but even after all that meditation, you can't completely take the California out of that person. Well, California love aside, Melissa's dedication to immersing herself in the traditional environment where the Dhamma teachings flourished animates this discussion. After sensing the transformative impact that these teachings can bring, following a number of courses in the US, Melissa wanted nothing less than to go to the source and drink from that overwhelming well. And that motivation for travel and immersive practice is such an inspiration for any meditator at home now contemplating such a trip. As you will hear, Melissa has made the most of her short time in this country. She's been in and out of the nun's robes over the last several years. She arrived at the studio as a laywoman, but her hair was still growing out from her most recent time in robes. Melissa has practiced in intensive retreats under a number of the top meditation teachers in Myanmar. And yet, she is just as affected by the ground-level experience of Burmese society as anything else, reminding us that wisdom comes from all sources. I think any meditator considering their own trip to the Golden Land will really be intrigued by what Melissa has to say here. And with that, I invite you to sit back and enjoy her journey. Okay, great. So thanks for stopping by and having a little chat. So I understand you've been in Myanmar about a year. You're originally from Central California.
Mm-hmm.
That's right?
And the Bay Area also.
Right. So tell us a little about your background and your upbringing.
Let's see. Born and raised in Stockton in Central California, and raised in a atheist, agnostic, very Western scientific household, kind of anti-religious household. Went to college in LA and
Which college?
UCLA.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Our whole family went to UCLA.
Oh. Yeah, studied art and Asian American studies and moved up to the Bay Area, to Oakland after a year in Korea in between. I'm half Korean, half white, and met my family there. And
oh, nice.
Hung out with cousins who I'd never met who were Buddhist, but like in a Korean blend of like traditional animism and shamanism kind of way. One of my cousins is actually a shaman who does ceremonies where she's channeling, maybe they're devas. I'm not really sure, but in order to help other people, give them spiritual advice. Let's see, I came to the Dharma in my later 20s, seeking something. I had kind of a slew of random violent traumas happen. And like getting mugged, getting in a car accident, getting my house robbed, like having a random person start stalking me, just like
Oh no.
this slew of things all
Yeah.
happened within 3 months. And I
Oh
was so
wow.
shaken
Yeah.
and doing a couple kinds of therapies to try to recover, but having panics anytime I'd try to leave my door. And I remembered that a few years before, a friend had told me, like 5 years before, a friend had told me about these totally donation-based meditation retreats. And I was like, oh my God, now is the time. I was in this state of PTSD where I couldn't go to work anymore. I couldn't leave my house like without panicking. And um, so I just signed up for a Goenka 10-day.
What year was that?
That was that was 10 years ago, I think.
2010 or so?
Yeah, around 2010.
So you went to CVC?
Yeah.
Right,
North Fork.
North Fork, yep.
At that point, I just decided, oh, I'm going to do this every year. I'm going to give myself this gift every year. I felt it brought my nervous system down to a point where I was functional at this very basic level again. But so much more than that ended up opening in my life as a result of just one retreat. Like my relationship with my mom started healing. Like we were able to communicate in ways where I was able to be patient and kind, even if her energy was critical or angry. Instead of throwing fire back, I was able to respond in ways that brought us closer and was helping heal our very distant relationship. And yeah, so I started sitting more. I started serving some Goenka retreats. I started trying retreats at other centers.
Mainly CVC at this point, or were you traveling around?
CVC and Kelseyville.
Is that a center, or is that?
Oh, yeah, Kelseyville's another Goenka center in Northern California.
Right. Is that Dhamma Manda, or?
Yeah.
Right.
Wait, Dhamma Manda?
Or that's Mendocino?
No, I think it is Dhamma Manda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I tried an LGBT retreat at Dhamma Dena in Joshua Tree, a center run by Irina Weissman, and in Ruth Dennison's lineage also, who had a teacher who had Sayagyi Ubakin as the same teacher.
She was one of the few people actually appointed by Sayagyi Ubakin to give Dhamma, and her center.
Goenka-ji.
Right, and a couple others, but she her center is established in Joshua Tree, actually not far from another Goenka center down there. But, so you attended. You didn't learn from Ruth Dennison directly.
No, from Ruth passed away. Like I was looking up other centers, and I was like, I want a woman teacher, and like I looked up Dhamma Dena like right around the time Ruth died, which was a few years ago, also around the time, like not that far off from when Goenka-ji died.
Right.
Yeah, and then I just saw some retreats there, and I went to my first one there also, and you can't even tell it's the same lineage. It's so dramatically different.
Yeah.
And
how so?
Very individualized, like interviews with Irina, and optional ones with the other teacher.
Irina is the current teacher in charge?
Very sensitive to things like trauma, very flexible, like people can, don't have to sit according to a strict structure like in the Goenka system. And there's a optional discussion group every afternoon where people share about difficulties or issues, things coming up in their practice, and a lot of other people identify or connect or like skill share in a way, with Irina kind of holding the space and guiding the conversation gently and sensitively. Yeah, so a real different feel. And also the center itself, it feels like a grandma's house because it was a grandma's house.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really like felt homely to me.
How long did you stay there?
I ended up doing, I sat a couple retreats there and ended up doing a work retreat for a couple months.
So you'd come from a background of doing the Goenka courses, and then from there went to Dhamma Dena. Is that right?
Is that the order? Well, I sat a Tibetan retreat in northern India at Tushita, which was also very different. And I tried like a people of color retreat at Spirit Rock, which really opened metta practice for me. Like I didn't feel it that strongly at the Goenka retreats. But yeah, it really opened up that dimension of kind of healing and grounding that I needed to actually settle my mind more. Yeah, Spirit Rock. I sat like a couple retreats with Tenzin Palmo, and I ended up sitting a 3-month at IMS, and it was there that I realized, oh, I could do another 3 months right now, and I would if I could. But I don't have the money to go to the forest refuge, and I was looking for lineage with strong connection, kind of traditional lineage, like looking towards
something more conservative,
the roots. I wasn't thinking conservative in my mind, but just something traditional and connected to Buddhist practice in a Buddhist culture.
Right. Why did you, so it sounds like you started with Goenka, that was your first taste of all of this, and then from there you had a smorgasbord of Mahayana and Theravada, different Theravada masters also in the Ubakin lineage, specialized retreats of LGBTQ and women of color, people of color, and we're just kind of imbibing all of this kind of diversity, some of it maybe you'd say Western specialized or adapted. But then out of this grew a desire to want to maybe move away from this and come to a more traditional setting, or is that correct?
Partially just, it's similar to my path in Chinese medicine. Like I studied Chinese medicine and was like, I studied Chinese medicine mostly in America.
Is that your profession?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, what is missing? It felt like something was missing from the picture that I was getting of, like, I know this is mostly or largely been filtered through translations, through American people or Westerners.
Chinese medicine you're talking about.
Yeah. And same with the teachings that I was receiving with Buddhism, just kind of feeling like, what's missing from this picture, or what is being filtered out through the Western culture and Western teachers that teachings are coming through. Like I could feel deep, powerful transformation in myself from the retreats that I sat, from the continuing practice over time, just tremendous shift in my quality of being day to day. Like, oh, I am suffering less genuinely. And I felt like I was ready to go deeper. Like I was just like exploring these different possibilities. Like there's all kinds of Dharma being taught in the West, and non-Dharma mindfulness, secular practices. But yeah, I felt called to practice more long-term. Also just, see what's missing from my picture.
So when you had this desire to move away from some of the Dhamma being practiced and taught in the U.S. and come to a more traditional society, was that more out of a desire to integrate into that and try something new, or was there also part of a rejection of how it was being brought and shared to U.S. or to the West?
Part of it is curiosity, and then part of it was just like hearing stories of teachers who had come to Myanmar and practiced long term, and feeling really inspired by them.
Like what stories as an example?
Like I read a book about Dipa Ma, and I heard teachers talking about her. Just, knowing that like Ruth came here and learned from Sayadaw Bakin. My first exposure to Dhamma was through Goenka and
Indian born or Burmese born Indian.
Yeah. Also, and even just like the first time I sat a Goenka retreat, when he said, I was blessed to be born in Burma, the land of Dhamma. I was like, I'm going there.
Yeah, me too.
Someday.
Exactly.
I don't know when. 10 years later, here I am.
I remember one time leading a pilgrimage for some meditators from the Goenka tradition. And I remember after about a week, one meditator I think it's from the US, saying to me, whenever I see all these scenes of like the monks or the nuns or the Dhamma halls or these other things, I just have this voice echoing in my ear of Goenka saying, "So wonderful, so wonderful." That voice was just animating everything he saw and experienced.
Yeah, I identify with that.
Yeah, me
Like
too.
yesterday, we were at Mahadana at Pa Auk, and like when the elder Burmese nuns were walking down the line receiving dana, I just started crying, like seeing these elder women, like many of them decades of deep practice as monastics, and the generosity of all the people coming to donate and making offerings to them, supplying everything they need and more for the coming year of their lives practicing, dedicating their entire lives to awakening and to freedom.
Right.
Like, so beautiful, so touching. I just cried.
Yeah.
There's so many things that I've been touched by coming here that I came just with curiosity and not so much with expectation of my practice to go any way or for, what I was going to encounter coming on this journey, just like an openness to see what's possible. And I first sat a retreat at Panditarama, and every talk they gave every single night, almost every talk, they were talking about nibbana. They were talking about reaching at least sotapanna in this life, at least reaching the first stage of enlightenment. It's possible in this very life. And I was like, wow, even in like sitting 3 months at a center in the West, like maybe I heard the word nibbana once.
Right.
Like,
yeah. And that's what you were coming for, that unadulterated in traditional Asian Buddhist society, how they frame those things, and maybe in the West, sometimes the discourses can come out and you're dealing with anger or emotion or
calming
integrating
your
in life.
anxiety.
Right.
Like why am I
A
doing
curative.
this? Oh, just to remedy the bad feelings I have day to day or the difficulties that I have interpersonally or something.
Right,
Like,
the Western Buddhist approach is taken that, not so much with Goenkaji, definitely. There you definitely get that talk of the final goal, but
let's see, maybe I wasn't ready to hear that. Like every consecutive Goenka retreat that I sat, I would hear something different in the teachings and realize like, oh, wow, I wasn't ready to hear that before. Now I hear it.
Right.
Amazing.
Right.
And yeah, but largely the Dhamma that I received in the West wasn't talking about this like bigger picture path that includes things like past lives. And at first, when I started meditating, I was really skeptical and a little aversive when that would be brought up. And now that's just part of my day-to-day reality, like as given. It's totally given here. And that is that bigger picture, your karma over many lifetimes matters. And you're working towards the complete end of suffering and the ends of the cycles of rebirth.
Especially in Pa Auk, right? They put more emphasis on that than other traditions, the past lives. Yeah.
Because people practice to the depth where they can actually see those things. They like, oh, like it's not just a nice mythological story from the suttas that you can see your past lives. People in modern day actually do this in these deep lineages. Like, to encounter teachers who have practiced to that level, and then just other meditators, and hearing people's stories about this karma, like this action in one life leading to this in another life.
So that was the kind of conversation you weren't getting back in the
Not at all in the not at all in the West. Yeah, more often I'd hear even teachers saying things like, oh, karma in past lives and future lives doesn't matter. What matters is how you're feeling right now in this moment. Bigger picture, something that struck me and continues to strike me most days is the cultivation of dana, of generosity here. How much people give and support and share and connect with one another. Like I really, through observing how all these other meditators and nuns are interacting with one another and with the resources of the center that they're given, just seeing how people are living dana as a way of life rather than what I've been taught largely in the West is like dana is just some money you give at the end of a talk or at the end of a retreat.
Right.
It's not a way of relating to the world, or I didn't really get that message. And it's been really transformative to be around people who are constantly wanting to share with others. Someone gives them, a special yummy treat, and immediately they're giving it to other people to share.
Yeah, that's a powerful lesson here.
The way that the teachings are completely supported, the way the teachings are offered completely on a dana basis, whereas in the West, at some centers in the West, they call it a dana basis, but then there's a registration fee and the teachers are receiving a stipend, and that's not dana as as I understand it. That's just another commercial exchange that allows people to come with the expectation of getting something because they're paying for it.
Right.
I would love to do work, and I'm starting to do work to change that. I think it's really important as the foundation of the teachings.
Yeah, the dana had a profound impact on me as well. And one of the things, the early learnings I had that I was quite affected by was how much mileage the Burmese Buddhists got out of giving dana, even if it was a small amount, how much bang for the buck they got from it. So like you have a dana, you don't just give dana, you have a dana ceremony. And it's just extended in so many ways. Before the dana ceremony, you set your mind of what you're about to do. It doesn't matter what you're giving. You set your mind for what you're about to do. And then the monk comes, and as you're passing the dana, he might have something that you chant, you repeat after him, saying, by this meritorious giving, may I achieve this or that, or be free from this or that. And you imbibe that. You remember what you're doing. You might invite your friends to come and witness it, and then to if they truly share the joy of what you're doing, then they can say sadhu, 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 and then they can also receive some of that benefit. And you can then have a certificate or take pictures so that you remember in later times, you remember the joy that you got from this, so you increase it. And it's just all these different stages. And then I remember this one time after I'd kind of come and appreciated that, I was attending I was serving on a 10-day Goenka course in the Philippines. And at the end of the course, there was one student who, like, it was kind of hot, and I can't quite remember the details, but I think they had, like, there was air conditionings, but it was a non-center, so we weren't supposed to use them, but we had turned it on for her, but they had said, sorry, but if we use the aircon for you, you have to pay some additional fee for operating it. And she said, okay, no problem. So at the end of the course, they on day 10, they told her how much it was. I don't know, let's say it was $200. But she when she went to pay, she said, sorry, let's say it was $160. I don't remember what it was, but let's say it was $160. So she then gave them $200, and they were going to give the change. She said, oh no, just have that as dana. And I was just horrified because I was like, this is your moment, and even if you don't do all those other ceremonies, I just insisted, like, no, you can't do this. Like, give her back her $40. Like that is hers. Once she has that $40, she needs to make another volitional act to want to give that, because you're not getting the benefit you should be deriving from this. Take all the religious ceremonial acts away. That's fine. Poly chanting, you don't need that. But you need that moment of volitional action, that I have this thing that I want to depart from to support others. And they, I think both sides kind of was like, okay, man, like whatever. I was like, no, this is really important. Like, you need to give it as a separate volitional action. And I think that's really, people come to a place like Myanmar for the practice, for access to these teachers, for good conditions, all of that. But then you have these moments that are in greater Burmese Buddhist society that no one teacher is actually giving you this lesson. It's by being a part of the functioning society that you're getting.
That cultural context of, like, being in a place where people are operating in this mode of generosity and of kindness to one another, and of mutual support for generating wholesome kusala states of mind. That has impacted me as much as sitting day to day, meditating all day long. Yeah, learning by having these models in front of me of how to skillfully interact with the world and with others. Someone gives me, a piece of chocolate, and I used to be like, chocolate, me, I'm going to save this for later. You
Right.
keep it as mine. But how much happier I am when I am giving it to other people now and seeing them enjoy it.
Right. And so also appreciating things. Like once I started to appreciate my mindfulness of giving dana, I appreciated it the other, because sometimes people would give Sangha dana at the monastery I was at, and then we would all take a moment to send good wishes for this volitional action they had given. And so then it would start to trickle down of if someone had offered me something, whether or not it was particularly useful or exciting or not, it took on a different feeling. I remember one time a friend donated, I was at a monastery, they just brought me I think milk powder. And so sometimes, I don't even remember what I used it for. I might make, when I had a 3-in-1 coffee, I might make it a little milkier. But by doing that, I was so conscious every package of, it was a few dollars, but I was so conscious every package this had come. I remember one time, I think it was actually when I visited Pa Auk Lin, we were invited to lunch there, and then a donor was distributing things. One of the things they were distributing was toilet paper. And I remember taking that toilet paper with joy and knowing, I mean, it sounds silly and maybe a little gross to say, but it was still this was given volitionally by someone that just wanted to help anyone coming to Dhamma, excuse me. And that took on a different kind of station in my mind.
Yes.
This object.
So even in the action of wiping your ass, you can feel gratitude and recognize your interdependence and the kindness of others who have given everything you need to support your practice, to support good conditions for development in Dhamma.
Not wanting anything in return. They just come up to me and just here, you take this. And that was really one of the magics to me of magic moments of Myanmar Buddhist society when I came here, was just that feeling that everyone wins, that you're able to give, and there's no there's no agenda from either side. And once I kind of got that, and once I understood the role of monastics and especially monks and renunciation and giving, I might be on a bus, and the bus would stop, 3:00 or something afternoon, and I just would have this sense of joy. Just go to the convenience store, buy some cold beverage, give it to them, and sometimes, especially, I would like doing it at airports or places where they wouldn't expect someone looking like me to know that and give it to them in the right way. It was this sense of joy, because I'm thinking, well, here I'm just living my daily life. Oh my gosh, there's a monastic. Quick, let me make merit and give something up and really do it with all the purity and good wishes, and then feel really good about myself after. And then from their side, they're just going through their life, and out of nowhere, just by the vocation they've chosen to have, someone comes and just gives them something, and here, you benefit, you enjoy, and both sides are just feeling so happy about the occasion.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And that's something I love at Pa Auk that I haven't encountered at any other center, is at lunchtime, especially at breakfast, at all the meals. Usually there's donors coming who are offering something, just like a special treat that doesn't get cooked in the monastery kitchen, or toothbrushes or sandals or once in a while umbrellas, just anything that we might need through the year is offered. And a lot of nuns as well are making offerings, and even things that are not just for their enjoyment or for practical purposes, but offering things like candles and flowers that the nuns and monks can then offer to the Buddha. It's like offerings to make offerings.
Right.
Just,
and foreigners are treated quite well in all of this, and really wanting to give with all the joy of coming here. I remember when I sat a 10-day course at Dhamma Jyoti, the Goenka Center, at one point during lunch, and I think I was the only foreigner at that particular course. I was mortified, but they came at the end of lunch. One of the servers came out and gave me a bowl of ice cream, only me. And I was like, is it ruder to eat it because I'm the only one, or ruder to leave it because they gave it to me? And I was just kind of sitting with that dilemma, and I kind of you're not supposed to look at anyone, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw Burmese table mates, and they all looked really happy that I got the ice cream.
Oh.
Like, yeah, that's great. The foreigner's going to eat something good. And I was like, okay, if they're happy, then I can try it.
Oh.
Mm.
It's been so amazing to exist within this culture that does that. And I know, like, from the West, yeah, it's easy to idealize, and a lot of people have criticisms like, oh, they're just giving to monks so they can be reborn as a deva in their next life. They think it'll whatever, but really they're just doing it for selfish motives. But even that, I'm like, giving at all doesn't exist in the West.
That's right. And there was a point when I was here and I started to look at be curious about all the psychology behind the giving, and seeing when it had more so-called purity, and when it was like, well, I want to take a picture and share on social media, or like these other things. And I started to be more critical, and I'd been in Myanmar for, at that stretch, a couple of years without leaving, and then I was kind of carrying those attitudes, and then I traveled to some other Southeast Asian country and looked at just the view of generosity there, and was just like, man, I'm picking apart these, like, sure, it's not, there's degrees of purity and pure giving, but it's like the fact that it's happening at all.
You know what? Make giving cool via Facebook. Like, I don't care. Yeah, I think that's great, actually.
Yeah. So getting back to your story, you came last year?
The end of 2018.
2018,
Yeah.
right? And you came for Panditarama?
Yeah. For their 2-month intensive, and I stayed some extra weeks after that. And then I went to Sayali Dipankara's retreat.
She's a teacher in the Pa Auk tradition.
Yeah.
Right? One of the few female meditation teachers in the country.
Yeah. I sought her out partially for that reason. A couple teachers had recommended her to me when I was like, are there any female teachers? And I had never heard a teacher talk explicitly about the past lives that she's seen, or like, say, the Satipatthana Sutta, the 32 parts of the body practice. Like, in the West, I'd been taught, like, imagining these different parts of your body. But then from Sayali Dipankara, it's like, you only do that practice once. She was giving instructions to more advanced students who had developed at least fourth jhana concentration. And from there, you actually shine the light of wisdom, the eye of wisdom, into your own body, and are looking at the 32 parts of your body with your mind's eye, not just imagining them. And then from the sutta, it says internally and then externally. And so externally, you start doing it to the person in front of you or the people next to you.
Oh, wow.
And then you just start seeing everybody as these different parts.
Right.
My mind was like totally blown.
How long did you spend with her?
A month. Yeah. I wish I could spend longer. It's not a center where you can really live year-round, though, because she's teaching all over the world.
She's in high demand, too.
Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Yeah. How so?
So inspiring. Let's see, there was one time where she sat with us and did metta with us, and there were vibrations that I was feeling that she was giving off, and it felt like I was being sucked into some kind of black hole, but like not in a bad way. Like my whole body felt like it was vibrating, and then I felt like I was on the verge of crying, and someone else near me started crying. And I've never felt a kind of really distinct vibrational power like that before. And there's so many ways that I was really impacted by getting to sit her retreat. I mean, I could say this about any Dhamma teacher, just like this compassionate presence that she offered. Like, when we would be talking during the interview times, I would only, have a very brief interview with her, but when she would just give me some very basic instruction, maybe it's something that she repeated from before, it's hard to describe. It almost would feel like I was floating sometimes. Like, when she's talking to me, I'm like in the tractor beam. And just listening to the interviews of other people, like during one talk, she said, I know who's breaking the rules here. I know who's breaking noble silence. When I close my eyes, it's very dangerous for you. I can see you off in the corners in your kutis talking to your friends, and off far away from the hall, you think I don't know. And then like a woman in front of me has her teacher interview, and she just reports, I can concentrate this many minutes or something. And Celia is like, so you've been chatting with your friends. And the woman's like, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do it again.
Yeah.
And Celia just smiles. I don't know. There's just weird stories where she uses her psychic powers and stuff.
Right. You had referenced in U.S. and then also in Myanmar wanting to seek out female teachers.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about wanting to have a female teacher that you felt was helpful for your practice?
I guess specifically in the context of a very obviously patriarchal culture where it's like
which culture are you referring to?
Myanmar, Burmese culture, where monks are given a lot more resources than nuns. They're a lot more revered. The teachers are almost all male at all these centers everywhere. But knowing that there's really highly developed female practitioners who exist. That's not answering your question. Why?
What does a female teacher give?
Why do I read biographies of like Ruth Denison or Dipankara or other female teachers? Why do I seek that out?
Right. What do they give to you that is missing from the male teacher?
There's something different that I've found in the energy of female teachers, or the approach of female teachers, or maybe the understanding or angle that they might be teaching from than male teachers. And that's not like at all exclusive. Like I've had very deeply compassionate, gentle, unique male teachers also, but there's something stronger that I can identify with, that especially within like a really patriarchal structure like Myanmar, where it's like only men are teaching, that creates a perception of like women's inferiority as practitioners, when I know that's just not true.
So there's something empowering, that
absolutely
encouraging, inspiring.
Being able to identify with the teacher in some way a little bit more. I feel like encountering Celia Dipankara, getting to practice under her, has really altered the course of my practice and my life.
How so?
From encountering her, I've grown a faith that was maybe a little shaky before, but now feels so much stronger. I have so much less doubt. I have so much more belief that the path really goes all the way, and there are teachers who can guide me. I have just so much more excitement to continue practicing.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you talked about wanting to come to a traditional Asian Buddhist country, to not referencing like Chinese medicine, where you see that things can get watered down and kind of filtered out according to the context. But then coming into that traditional Asian Buddhist society, you then have to deal with certain kind of patriarchal attitudes that are not that they're unexistent in Western culture, but there's certainly more awareness about them than they are here. So how has that dynamic been for you?
Well, it's been really healthy for me to just check the filters I have on both sides of, or let's see, to get to kind of see the lens that the Dharma is being fed to me through both sides.
Sure.
From having the perspective of being in the West and then being in the East, like both of them have filters. This harder line patriarchy in Myanmar versus different kinds of filters that the teachings are coming through in the West, and understanding bigger picture context of those things. it's kind of complex. Like, there's a way that I feel safe in Myanmar, this like deep kind of like physical sense, like visceral sense of safety that I have practicing here, um, that I don't have when I'm in America. Like in general, do I want to use this example? Okay, so the 3 month that I sat at IMS, um, there was a couple weeks where I kept having these really strong, it felt like invasive visions of a man with a gun coming and shooting me again and again. Um, this was pretty deep into the retreat, like many weeks into the retreat, and I felt like I was going crazy. I was like, "What is this garbage in my mind?" Like, but it was so violent and terrifying, and I was really, just trying to observe that. Okay, like, let it go, come back to the meditation object, like, and it kept happening. And right at the end of the retreat, when noble silence was broken, a guy who was sitting behind me, diagonal behind me, came up to me, and one of the first things he said was, I just kept imagining getting a gun and shooting everybody, like, again and again, like, for weeks. I just, like, I played a lot of like, first-person shooter video games, and, like, where is all this anger coming from? Like, I just kept imagining shooting everybody, and my jaw just dropped. I was like, "That's crazy," because, I kept having these intense visions of, like, a white man with a gun coming and shooting me again and again. Like the West, there's this idea in the West that we're more culturally advanced or something as far as like gender dynamics go, or there's a condescending attitude towards things like gender segregation that they have at Burmese or other Asian meditation centers. And just from experientially feeling like sitting around, say, this dude who's imagining shooting me again and again versus like nuns in the jhanas, like my experience of comfort and safety and of having a suitable place to meditate, like I'll take the Burmese patriarchy with their, strict gender line, gender segregation over, well, I don't know, what I experienced there.
And you're still pretty early along all this. So as you develop further, I wonder what having more experiences in both places will start to inform, and you'll start to change and see and get a better feeling for that.
Right. In those visions of the man with the gun shooting me, it kept coming, and so I started in my mind like shifting it to metta. Let me just like blast this man with metta before he shoots me. Okay, like if I can't catch him early enough, like just whenever, just like shift it away from fear and terror to just blasting metta at him before anything happens. And like eventually the visions changed, and like he's stopped actually shooting me, and I was just there with my metta. And I never asked him how the visions ended for him.
Hopefully that helped.
But I don't doubt that helped. And just for my own development of concentration and practice, I would rather not have that energy at all.
Right, which explains why you're here. So you went to Panditarama when you came, and then you went to Sister Dipankara's monastery, nunnery, meditation center.
Yeah, meditation center.
Right, yeah. And then where did you land after that?
And then straight to Pa Auk.
And you've been there since?
Yeah.
Pa Auk Moyamane or Pianlin?
Pinulin, where her teacher, Pa Auk Sayadaji, is. And I've been there since then.
And how's that been?
I'm grinning. It's been amazing. For so many reasons. Also, just being around other women, like I get really impacted hearing other people's interviews with the teachers. you're just in a big room and the teacher is just interviewing people one by one. Everyone hears each other's interviews, and just hearing where other people are in their practice and feeling so inspired and excited, and just learning, oh, should I ever get there? That's what I do at that stage.
Right.
But, hearing women describing seeing their past lives, or describing discerning the deva realms, or the peta, like the ghost and hell realms, and the spiritual urgency that inspires to practice when they see those realms and realize they never want to be there again. They will, and yeah, people who are even way further than that in the Pa Auk method of practice. It's so inspiring, and just like deciding for myself, however, I don't know how long I'm going to be here and practice. I am setting, well, I know I'll be here at least for all of this year. And I think it's very likely that I will continue for a number of years into the future practicing here. It all feels so worth it. Like, whether or not I ever get to the jhanas, like there's nuns who've been there for 10 years who have not even, developed a few minutes of concentration or nimitta or anything like that. I don't have, I have maybe a realistic sense of, anything can happen in my practice. And I am just dedicated to continuing without expectation and without grasping to a goal or needing to prove anything. From this year that I've been here, I've seen my mind shift in such a wholesome way towards so much more kusala arisings, and shifting away from akusala, that it doesn't matter if I ever get to the jhanas or not. It's all of this practice is worth it. I have no doubt in that. And I take lessons from, I met a 86-year-old nun who feels like she's coming to the end of her life, and she's so upset that she didn't get to Sotapanna yet. And I'm like, I mean, it's great to have that as a goal, and I hope I'm not upset if I don't get there. Just
right. And then sometime along your Pa Auk journey, you ordained as a nun?
Yeah.
That was in Pa Auk?
I ordained at Panditarama right when I got here, actually.
Oh, right. So through all that experience, you were actually a nun.
Actually, so I had to disrobe to go to Sele Dipankara's, which is really funny.
Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah, because when I applied, I was a laywoman, and then soon before the retreat, I finally had a chance to email, because at Panditarama you're not allowed to, have your phone or any technology. And I sent an email saying, "Oh, just so you know, I ordained as a nun. I wanted to make sure that was okay." And they said, "Oh, actually, all the nuns' accommodations are full. You have to disrobe if you're going to."
Oh my gosh!
Come,
so for a matter of housing,
come as a lay person.
Wow.
So I said, "Fine." I'm just here to practice. I'm not I would like to stay a nun, but I accept whatever conditions will be most conducive to practice, and I'm really excited to practice with CLA. So whatever.
Yeah. So you've been a lay since then?
No, I reordained at Pa Auk.
Okay, and then you disrobed.
And then I disrobed to go home.
Yeah, because you're not. For people who can't see you, you're not a nun now.
Yes, I'm not a nun right now. Yeah. I likely will be again soon when I get back to Pa Auk. So I disrobed to go visit my family. None of my family has ever sat a retreat or is Buddhist or well, my dad started meditating.
Good.
Yeah. In recent years, he started meditating, and it's been beautiful to see that shift, along with just a general shift of more peace and kindness in my family, even though no one else is meditating. Like, I know my practice is positively affecting everybody. But I disrobed to go home so my family would be able to see me and feel the goodness of all the work that I've done over the last year practicing here without reacting negatively in fear of this unknown of like,
Right.
Oh no, my daughter's now a religious fundamentalist or something, whatever preconceived notions they have about what a nun is. And it was really good to visit, and I was able to share the goodness of my practice and the things that I've learned in the last year with my family.
Right. Do you feel a difference between when you're practicing in robes and when you're practicing as lay?
I kind of just decided that, like, in my heart, I'm still a nun. I'm just disrobing for practical purposes, for for the sake of ease of travel and for benefiting my family and friends.
So when you take on the robes or when you take them off and wear normal clothes, you
I
don't see
feel
a big difference?
I don't feel that different.
Right.
Because just my heart is in this direction. And next year, when I go home for the holidays, I have the intentions of going as a nun. It feels like coming out.
How so? I mean, everyone knows what you are, what you do, what you value. So it's not like in the closet of that, right?
Sort of. People know, like, all my friends and family know I like to meditate a lot. They know I like to go on retreats a lot. But being raised in a context of like my family and the communities that I've been in, to actually like be seen as a religious person is kind of frowned upon, or
it's an identity issue, like
even taboo.
Right. So when you talk about coming out, the act of coming out as gay is a change in identity and claiming an identity. So I guess even though, correct me if I'm wrong, but even though your background as a meditator or even as a nun is not a secret, it's an identity status to actually be seen, and not just seen, but being a nun, your regulations around behavior and food and everything else is also has to be altered. So,
right. How
so
you're
that identity,
orienting it.
Right.
It will be seen as really different to other people in my community back in California. Yeah, where most people are coming from, I think, similar preconceived notions that I used to have about what is a nun? Like someone who's, say, sexually repressed, or, maybe they were brainwashed into some religious beliefs, or...
Is this kind of like liberal California culture?
Yeah, like liberal, intellectual, and very kind of like science-based.
Sure.
That's the kind of context that I'm coming from.
Right. And you did talk before about wanting to kind of bridge this, not before in the interview, but before you came, you talked about it being a passion of yours to want to bridge something with cultures and, the practice you see here and how it's coming to the West. Like, can you say more about that, about what you want to do or what you're trying to do?
I'm starting a fundraising project to offer at least one to start completely Dana-based retreat at Dhamma Dena in Joshua Tree. They have a small registration fee. It's like as low as possible. Like it just covers food and lodging and just basic managerial costs that are super low. But really feeling like it's important to cultivate Dana culture in the West as the foundation of the teachings, as the foundation of people's practices. Dana and Shila, generosity and ethics. I feel really passionate about creating. Goenka has made a model that has spread across the world and shown that it's possible in the West.
Right.
And yet there's still a lot of Western teachers and just Western Dharma spaces that don't believe that or don't trust it or think, well, we're lay people, so therefore we should charge money. Even though Goenka was also a lay person. I think creating more models for that is really important. I know I myself, in the traumatized state that I was in when I first came to a Goenka retreat, where I couldn't work anymore. I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent. And having a place, like, I wouldn't have gone if they had charged a stipend.
Right. That's true of so many people.
Yeah. I wouldn't have been able to go. And just even a small fee might deter someone who could really benefit from the teachings, and creating opportunities for people to give, to generate wholesome states of mind and feel the goodness of giving to others and sharing with others and diminishing this hard sense of I, me, and mine and the scarcity mentality that is so pervasive in the West.
Zero-sum game.
It's, so important. So, yeah, before I go back into deep practice, I'm doing a little email and online campaign to raise some money specifically for a people of color retreat that's being offered in November of this year, and hoping to get the ball rolling for that to be possible for more retreats. And I know it's possible. I totally believe it. Other things. I like looking at the things that I initially had stigma towards coming to these teachings. Just, for whatever reasons, for many reasons, Western teachers don't talk about things that sound religious.
Right.
Like past lives, or like don't really delve into exploring karma, maybe, or
Deva realm, etc.
Yeah, Deva realms, and also just a lot of things like chanting or studying, reading the suttas. Not a lot of practitioners do that, and in my own practice, it's opened up new dimensions of understanding to do those things, to engage in them. There's good reasons that those have been carried through traditional lineages and cultures for so long. There can be, depending on how your mind is during chanting, it can be like calming to the nervous system, and you're engaging with your voice in a community. You're also learning the teachings as you chant them. There's a lot of good things that can come from it. But I was totally resistant to that for years. And I've come around. I can feel the benefit now to it.
Right.
So just also softening around my beliefs at any given moment about what's valuable and what's not, because all these things that I didn't think were important before are now so vital in my motivation to practice.
Coming to Myanmar can do that.
Yeah.
Right. So last question, what has been your favorite place to meditate in Myanmar?
My favorite place to meditate is the upstairs floor of the Dhamma Hall at Pa Auk.
Punulin?
Yeah, Punulin. There's a brightness, and there's just a really beautiful energy in there. And one day when I was listening to another woman's interview with the Sayadaw as I was waiting in line for mine, she said, I just started discerning the Deva realm, and when I see them, there's 4 that come sit behind me in the hall. Should I be scared? And I was like, wow, oh, maybe that's why it feels so good in there. There's all these devas coming to meditate too.
Wow.
And the teacher's response, he said something like, oh, yeah, that's normal, nothing to worry about. There's devas who meditate too, and they like it when the energy's good.
Wow. So that's a good story to end on. And for anyone coming to Myanmar, check out the upper floor of Pa Auk Center at Punulin.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here, and best of luck with your travels and journey ahead in Myanmar.
Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So Joa, let's talk about that interview with Melissa. It sounded really great. How was it for you?
Yeah, it was great. It was relaxed. It was chilled. As I said in my introduction to it, it's like that's what happens when you put two Californians in a room together in Myanmar. They just, even though we'd actually never met before doing that interview, we just immediately relaxed into a pretty calm and chill, easy back and forth. And definitely halfway through the interview, I started feeling like, yep, this is a fellow Californian I'm kicking it with. So.
Right. Anything stand out from that?
Yeah, so it was recorded a number of months ago, and it was really interesting going back and listening with a few month pause, because before this, the interviews that we were doing, the release and production time was much faster, so it was much fresher in the memory. And I felt like I was listening to it as a listener. I didn't really know what was coming next. I didn't know where the conversation was turning. It's always different when you hear it as a second person, listening on headphones rather than when you're involved, because when you're involved, you're obviously trying to think of where to go next. But having that space was quite interesting, and being able to reflect and get some perspective on it.
Right. When you look back at it now, what stands out?
One of the main things that came up was just this contrast between East and West that she went into, and she described, and contrasting being a Westerner coming from US and going into a traditional culture like Myanmar, and contrasting the different values and practices on either side. As I went back and listened and then took notes on that interview, there were several categories that I was aware of that her talk was tapping into. So maybe I could start with one of them. We can go from there.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so one thing that struck me about this contrast of East and West was the idea of transmission of the Dhamma, and how the Dhamma, and any spiritual teaching for that matter, is being transmitted is largely dependent on the culture and the conditioning and the preferences, the predilections, the details of who that culture is. And so here's a person that is spending time in East and West and seeing the different ways that the Dhamma is being transmitted. And where she went in describing that, I found really interesting, because she talks about this tension between the values and familiarity of your own culture contrasted with the possibility of going closer to a source of a teaching. And she actually did that twice. She did that once with traditional Chinese medicine, and then again with the Dhamma. So she saw this kind of watering down in the Western context of how these teachings of Dhamma were coming and then being integrated into contemporary American society. And then contrasting that, you saw how she was just lit up with how she heard the way that it was expressed and talked about in Myanmar, things that Western teachers and students don't talk about or aren't interested in or don't see relevant. She talked about, devas, past lives, karma, chanting, studying, sutta reading. These are just some of the notes that I took. And she even mentioned she was resistant to chanting originally, but then started to see the value of it. So it's just quite interesting that as the Dhamma is being transitioned in these different cultures, she's seeing a lack of certain kind of opportunities or discussion points in one, whereas the other one is stressing it. And it's this kind of expanding and opening possibilities of where her spiritual life can lead. And I think that's kind of what Myanmar is. That's one of the reasons why we're interested in doing this podcast. That's what our own experience in the country has been, and being able to talk to people that have seen the potentiality of what Myanmar can bring to their spiritual life, and describe how they're using those possibilities. That's really that light going off in that opportunity being presented to Melissa is what we see in her talk here.
Right. We've seen that with other people as well, right? Sele Kantachari said something like that as well, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about mentioning Nibbana. Like Nibbana is actually something that's talked about. Like, like, I don't know if it comes from U Pandita, but U Pandita has that book, In This Very Life. Whereas in the West, what's often talked about is, in the mindfulness movement, it's just like how it can almost more like psychologically improve our lives. There's a real psychological bent to it. It's like the end goal of the whole Dhamma isn't as emphasized, it seems like. That's what I got from her as well. And I find that as well. A lot of people, because of that, don't seem to think it's a reachable goal. And then they don't there's like a different orientation of it that actually might be coming from the transmission. So I think that's interesting.
Right. And it also struck a personal tone for me because I remember that as I first started to stay at Burmese monasteries, I was just amazed how the conversations, the practice, even the structure of spiritual life could be done with my own agency and experimentation. And this was so different than like at Western meditation centers where you're following this strict set of rules. And I'm not contrasting one in a more favorable light than another. I really understand why coming in as a new student in a different culture without any context for the Buddhist teachings, you do need those rules and the administration and everything else. Otherwise, students are just going to do whatever they're going to do. And you're actually coming to a meditation center because you want to learn. You're there with humility to take in this teaching that you don't know. So I think that this type of teaching at a meditation center with all the rules is actually quite important. And you, Zach, have referenced this maturation process of a Dhamma child to a Dhamma adolescent. And I think once you absorb those rules of a meditation center and you understand why they're there, coming to a place like Myanmar allows you to open up to the richness of this possibility and discussion, and to be able to grasp other opportunities and possibilities, and to go to lean into what is feeling right and natural at a certain time. You're able to do that in ways that you can't at more structured meditation centers.
Right. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have empathy for the way things have developed in the West largely. At the same time, there do seem limitations. I'm not sure how those would be overcome, but it seems to naturally then tend towards compartmentalization. Like there's the course and then there's the rest of your life, where not only is that investigation encouraged in that more Dhamma adolescent phase more available or encouraged. I'm not sure what the right word is there for that, but that sense of, how to say it? There's so many other parts of Dhamma than the compartmentalized practice. It's not just the location that's compartmentalized. It's not just the rules, but the practice itself becomes. And so then I think that lends itself towards those attitudes, towards those other parts of Dhamma that a traditional culture practices. And yet, if you engage in those, and there's all different kinds of ways to engage in those things you listed off, like chanting, for example, studying scriptures, giving dana. I mean, isn't that, I mean, I thought that was funny what she said. It's like dana is generosity. It's not just what happens at the end of a course. That was hilarious, but it's so true. It's like, I mean, I understand how that manifested, but at the same time, generosity is like a smile walking down the street is generosity. There's all kinds of generosity, and it's cultivating that quality that is so important. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is this list of things that she's saying that aren't part of that compartmentalized Western Dhamma experience that happens at a retreat center, or doesn't seem to usually. Of course, that's maybe an overgeneralization, but it doesn't lend itself to that kind of day-to-day living of Dhamma, So these things all seem to go hand in hand, like it's not just sitting with your eyes closed. It's walking around, talking to people, asking questions, doing this, that. It's all of it. So it's like this package that and there's a resistance to it when you first meet it. And then when you open yourself up to it, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, and it reminds me of after I had spent some time at Burmese monasteries and was able to just see the dynamic quality of who I would meet that would come, and how I'd see the monastery being managed, how I'd come across different books or teachings or conversations, and just the richness of that. And then after a few years of that, I went back to the West and I was at a meditation center there. And definitely, I'll front load this by saying that I appreciated the discipline and the orderly quality of the meditation center, the how planned and structured so much of it was. But then on the other hand, there was like this exploration I wanted to have with the other meditators I was meeting, to be able to talk outside of the particular set of teachings and technique and structure that was being handed down, and realizing there was just no place for that. There was nowhere to go with some of my own interests of wanting to explore, discuss, or go in different directions. it was just a different kind of experience that has its own benefits. But in Myanmar, you definitely see, as Melissa talked about, you see the benefits of falling into this system where, yes, you have to follow a certain set of discipline. It's actually quite a bit more discipline in the West. And there's some religiosity with that as well. But as you fall into that and embrace that, the directions of where you're able to go and what you're able to explore are just so profound and immense.
The place where I see that happening in the West is online, like Dhamma chat discussion threads, So just as you were talking, I was like trying to think about, where does that happen? How would you engage in that? But it is a little different. In Myanmar, it seems to be woven. No one's like directing it or controlling it. There's no platform for it. It's actually that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's just really special conditions there. Well, it seems like everyone we talk to like speaks to that some way or another. There seems to be a few things that happen, a bit of resistance to it, mm-hmm. A bit of a surprise, and sometimes a letdown of certain ideas that they held about what it would be. And then like after that kind of settles down, like this like deep appreciation mm-hmm. for what's actually available in a place like Myanmar, also in Thailand, here in Thailand, same kind of thing.
Right. There's like this freedom to set up your spiritual life with the full support of a society and a monastic system. It's an amazing part of Myanmar that you'd find in so few countries in the world of any spiritual tradition. And so many of the life stories that we hear from the guests on the show for the interviews are basically different formulations of how they've charted their own exploration and experimentation within that.
Right. As far as the monastic system goes, I think there's an attitude amongst some in the West that's kind of something that may have been important in another time and mm-hmm. place. But I had some really interesting experiences that I'll lay one out mm-hmm. for you if you don't mind. So when I was a monk, I went back to the U.S. and I participated in a particular practice, and I was just watching the spectrum, not only in that organization, but all organizations about in the West, how to deal with remunerating a teacher. I think the Goenka system is probably the coolest way to do it. But I have sympathy for all of them in that culture, in those conditions, the people that, or organizations that just charge money, mm-hmm. because at least at some level, that's clear, that because that's what that culture is used to. At the same time, then there's people that, okay, we'll just cover the costs. There'll be a cost to cover the basics, and then the remuneration for the teacher. Mm-hmm. And then, some teachers like trying, I think this is a noble intention to live off dana. And so they have more time to devote to growing and then sharing, but that's so difficult though. Like as a layperson doing that they have to like think about what level they're going to live at. Like, what level of clothes do I buy? What level of car do I buy? If they have a family, do they use dana to take care of their family as well? All these decisions, it's just it just made me appreciate how brilliant it is to have a monastic system, because it's clear and it's simple, and so it's all free. I mean, people donate like a monastery or things like that, but if the people are taking care of the monks in that way because they value what's happening there. Sorry, I don't mean to say monks. I mean monastics. I do really think it's essential, and I wish there were nuns as well in full force, the fourfold representation of the following of the Buddha, the monks and nuns and lay women and lay men, as a whole. But the monastics, because you don't have to think about that. You don't, you just wear robes. You live wherever you're provided. You just don't. That all of that's just so simplified. And then it's the ones that can afford to donate like a monastery then makes a place, but then anyone can come. So it is free, and it just seems so much cleaner. I mean, like I said, I appreciate the struggles that happen in the West with that, and I appreciate all the different ways people are trying to approach it. And I really understand all of them in their own way. Then, like, just dealing with how difficult that is, it seems it was nice to just reflect on how brilliant the monastic field is, just in that aspect, let alone that the opportunity is always there also for, it's not about me as a monk or a woman as a nun and taking care of them. It's like that field is always being cultivated and preserved for anyone that chooses to participate in that and take advantage of those conditions. Those conditions are amazing. So there's one point she made where she said, in her estimation, there wasn't much difference for her between being a monk and a lay person. I was reflecting on that. I didn't want listeners necessarily to get the wrong idea. I wonder if she would agree with this, that like she was technically a lay person, but she was living in a very monastic style kind of life. She didn't have a job, she didn't have a family, so she was very much immersed in the Dhamma. And in that sense, doing it that way or doing it in robes, there wasn't a huge difference. Right. I don't think the impression would be, though, that there's no difference between lay life and monk life. I think that, I keep saying monk, I mean to say monastic.
Yeah, and if we bring that idea of renunciation back to Melissa's talk and how she was expressing this difference between East and West, this is the essential difference in how one is able to follow the Buddhist spiritual life between the US and Burma, is the possibility of ordination. And not that it's impossible in America, but it's pretty close to it. Whereas in Myanmar, it's every corner, what teacher do you want, what place, what kind of practice. And so this difference between the possibility of living a renounced life in Myanmar and continuing on a path of a lay meditator in US was a real difference between East and West. And it was really interesting how it was expressed through Melissa, because she's coming from this very progressive and scientifically minded community in liberal California. And so it was really interesting that her embracing the nunhood brought up this kind of anxiety in how her own community would see her. And it really became an identity issue. I mean, she actually used the expression coming out to refer to her arriving in California in nun's robes. And I think that's something that a lot of Western monastics, when they've gone back home and coming back home with a new set of rules, new set of clothes, a new set of, maybe not a new set of beliefs, but definitely a set of discipline they have to have, and fearing judgment based on the conditioning in your home community. And I know exactly what she's talking about, because we're from, I think we kind of fell into a groove on that interview. And I also came from a really, really liberal and progressive part of Northern California. And it's funny what conditioning does to your experience, because I think for me, growing up in like a very liberal and progressive community, that became kind of the traditional norm for me. That was just the way I thought the world was. And when I ended up going to college in Oregon, and it wasn't a conservative school, but it was, I think anywhere was more conservative than the county I grew up in Northern California, I had this sense of culture shock myself. And it just goes into how much you are conditioned by your culture in ways you don't even necessarily understand. And when I eventually came back to that county in Northern California, after traveling the world, living in other places, meeting other kinds of people, being in other areas, I was kind of shocked by how familiar everything felt, and also seeing how kind of out there and weird everything was in ways I had never understood before, because that was just normal to me. So it's all these types of conditioning that affect how you view the world and what you see as normal and what you see as kind of the way to do things. And then when you step outside of that, seeing that there is this other way and having to kind of have a foot in both worlds. And that's so much of what Melissa's talk is about, is having a foot in both worlds.
I was thinking about that section for a while, that whole, because I think that the association with liberal is like, just more open to all kinds of possibilities. So that should be, you would think, inclusive of monasticism. So what is it about monasticism that is difficult to swallow? And I think it has something to do with that it's hard for a really open person to embrace someone that's chosen what seems like a real restriction, a real closed thing, I think there's a rub there. And I think that this came up the other day, and like, there's so much of trying to break free in America of, of hierarchy and power structure and stuff. So like, don't put me in this box, and then, so that's become like, in a sense, what liberalism is, let's not put each other in boxes, let's recognize each other, but, let's open up and be inclusive of everyone. And then, so when there's this movement towards something that's not that, even if it's just one person doing it and not imposing it on anyone else, there seems to be some kind of rub there.
Yeah, and maybe getting a bit too into the weeds with politics here, especially at a fraught moment. But it just reminds me of a friend of mine who went to UC Santa Cruz. And mind you, again, we came from ultra liberal and progressive families. I think that still characterizes us and our backgrounds. And he was going to Santa Cruz, which is about the same, I would say. But this is a quote that always stuck in my mind. Someone asked him, it's a pretty progressive, open place, right? And he kind of smiled and said something like, well, they're really, really open, but they're just open to things they want to be open to. And I think that might have been some angle that Melissa was coming from, that there was this sense of openness, but in that openness, like everything else, like every other community and place in the world, there was a conditioned mind that looked at and examined what that openness was pertaining to. And I think that when I probed in the interview, she indicated that there was a suspicion of organized religion, and someone that fell into some kind of religiosity was looked at in a certain way. And so coming back in nuns' robes wouldn't exactly mesh with that type of progressive community that was open only to certain things, but suspicious of others.
Right. And she was talking about those, I think it was, I don't know if it's two experiences or whether I just made one up in my head, but the one of like being let me back up a second. So we could think that in a liberal sense that we shouldn't have the men on one side and the women on the other side. We should just not make those demarcations. And we can think that's better. That's liberal. That's more open, we could say that, but at the same time, that can be traumatic. I think sometimes it's good to have the support of your own kind sometimes, and that may not be obvious at first. So, if someone might have trauma with the opposite sex, and then to be surrounded by the opposite sex during a course could be actually quite difficult, in ways that are not necessarily supportive. So in that case, it could be looked at like, oh, this is too conservative, too structured, too, like demarcated between men and women. And then, but that actually, so it could be that judgment against that kind of conservatism. And then at the same time, when you actually do it, like there's actually could be like this comfort that's very supportive to practice, so it's just not so cut and dry.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you took it to this topic of gender, because that was the third thing on my list. When I was hearing her contrast East and West, Myanmar and US, I started to write down what she was saying and then put them into assigned categories that it fit into. And I mentioned transmission was the first one I talked about. Renunciation was the second. Gender was the third category that I heard some of her comments falling into just naturally, organically. And I really appreciated what she said. She really spoke with nuance. And on one hand, she did criticize this idea that there's this sense we're more culturally advanced in the West as far as gender dynamics go. And she said she doesn't really appreciate how this condescending attitude and perspective that Westerners have towards, as you mentioned, gender segregation is found in Myanmar. However, what I really liked about where she went with this is that she was not shy to criticize the patriarchal culture found in Myanmar. She was not shy to express dismay that monks were treated with much greater reverence than nuns, and that so few nuns were put in positions of being able to teach the Dhamma, despite the fact that many were known to have very high stages of jhana. And so having this kind of contrast and nuance was presented this picture of East and West, these different worlds that she was in. And what I really appreciated was that while she was in this traditional culture, she was trying to find a female teacher that would be able to instruct her and help her on her path. And so she's staying within this traditional framework, the origin, as she called it. She's going back. So she's not coming back here to try to disrupt or teach or bring her own ideas or impose. She's in this traditional model, but within this traditional model, she's seeking out and proactively finding a female teacher that would be capable of teaching her. So she knows what she needs and she's going after that. And she's working within the model to be able to find that path. I found that really inspiring. She ends up finding Sayali Dipankara and just has an enormously positive experience with her. So as a female practitioner, as a female lay practitioner or nun, she does openly acknowledge a sense of inferiority, learning from only men, from only male teachers, only monks, only sayadaws. And so seeks out this great and respected, revered teacher within Burmese Buddhism, within that traditional culture that brought her here and that is her reason for being there, and that is able to fill her not just with this great Dhamma wisdom and meet her where she's at and be flexible and just provide so much of what she's looking for, but is also a female teacher that is able to give her confidence and inspiration of where she is on the path and where Melissa could go.
Right. Again, I always just come back to, really sticking to the way it was set up. I think it's easy to criticize, but like if you criticize what's going on in the modern sense, I think the criticisms end up falling into the category like, well, we changed things. We're not following it anymore. That's why it doesn't work, And so so I'm referring directly here to the Fourfold Sangha. I really think those that dedicate their entire lives to something, there's going to be people that arise in that field that become like all stars. If you have a Sangha like all over the place, you're going to get some rising stars. And so then when the women are not fully supported in that way, it just, there are some that still rise to the top like that, but I just wish there was more. I mean, I wish the field was bigger. I wish the field was in equal proportion. And so the benefits of the monasticism are missing largely in the West, in the Western Dhamma scene. At the same time, in the East, they've lost some essential components that make it imbalanced. And so some of the benefits are still there, but there's this, turning it into a patriarchal imbalance is, I think that's, there are issues there. So again, if it wasn't set up that way, so if we were just following, and I think we can, I think, it's time to reinvigorate, if we know better, it's time to correct that. So I really hope, the efforts that are being made and have been made continue to grow. I hope that opens up.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you deny a certain segment of your population the same opportunities as others, you're not only is that segment of the population losing out on opportunities, but the entire society suffers. And that's true whether you're talking about education or economy or professional trade or whatever. I mean, this has been shown in studies time and time again. And so in the spiritual field, if you're denying some segment of the population the same opportunities of study and practice and teaching and everything, scholarship and everything else, whether that's based on ethnic or national or color or gender, or whatever, then not only is that group missing out, but all of society that would benefit from this group being able to take on this role and then turn that back into society for the benefit of everyone also misses out. So the more that any particular group is denied this opportunity and discriminated against and doesn't have the same opportunities for advancement, then not only will they rise to show what their potential is, but then once they reach that potential, the others can't benefit to the same extent. And just as Myanmar society has allowed and encouraged female teachers like Sayali Dipankara, and in Sagaing, there's some really fantastic nunneries like Sechaditi is last 10, 15 years has really accomplished some pretty incredible things. And the more that these opportunities start to manifest and nuns are able to rise to the top of their natural abilities, there's a different way of disseminating and bringing the Dhamma to people that you don't get if they're all just say it as at the top. So I think that's great. And I think it's great that Melissa was able to know what she needed as a practitioner and then seek that out within the traditional Burmese Buddhist framework that was her reasons for wanting to come and go to those origins. So in other words, she's not denying her own desire or path or direction by going to this more conservative society. She's respecting the society as it is, but then within that framework, she's seeking out what she knows she needs as a practitioner. And that, again, is also, as we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, that kind of freedom and experimentation and exploration is something that can't happen at a more structured meditation center, or even in the American Buddhism that we see in the U.S., because of just the dynamicism of opportunity that you get when you're in Myanmar.
Right. Well, back to that idea of sometimes in our liberal minds think restriction is the way to losing a sense of freedom, and yet I find in Buddhism overall a paradox here, and it's like a piece of paper, and you think the piece of paper is important, and like if you're a pen, you could draw anywhere on that paper, and that's what freedom to do all of that, right? But then if you poke a hole in it, to stay within that little hole on the piece of paper seems so limiting. And then, but what the Dhamma seems like to me is like, at first you think the paper is important and it's everything, and that's where you should wander around. And then you make this little hole and you're like, I'm not going to go in there. Don't force me into this little hole. But then you go into that hole and you find it's a little bit of space. And that space just grows and grows. And then the space becomes much, much bigger than the paper.
Right.
And so there's these systems that are kind of set up like that, I mean, in reality, they sometimes can be too constrictive, like if they become controlling and patriarchal and power structure, that is a real thing. But at the same time, when I read the Buddhist words, I do see these words like restraint, or like this is the right way and this is the wrong way, and that seems really restricting. And yet when you dive into that opens up into much more than, it's this paradox of going into restriction to gain freedom. And the freedom we think we have is actually the restriction. Like staying on that paper is much more limiting than going into the space and then seeing that space is everything everywhere, like infinite. That little hole becomes an infinite thing that's much, much greater on a completely different dimension than this, no matter how big the paper was.
Right. And one comment I've heard from a foreigner who was in America was, this person said something like, in the US, you talk about all this freedom that you have. And when I go to the supermarket, sure enough, I see 50 different kinds of soda or cereal or something. And so you have the freedom of choice that you can have anything you want. But at the end of the day, you can only choose one. So of all these different choices, there's still only one that you get. And all that choice just kind of overwhelms and overloads the mind sometimes in this paradoxical way. And it reminds me of when my first meditative experience was in Japan at the Goenka Center there, Dhamma Banu. And I remember between the courses and sometimes for dinner, as servers, we would just, whatever happened to be in the kitchen at the time, whatever flavorings or oils or vegetables or whatever else, we would just put that together to make a meal. And so, of course, we were limited by just happenstance, whatever happened to be left over. And because we were at a center, it was kind of hard to go out and buy things. And you weren't really thinking creatively, what great things do I want to make? And paradoxically, I found that when we were limited by choice with the number of things available, we would come up with like much greater and more fabulous creations just in the kitchen, just in a few minutes. We just have, 20 minutes to cook. This is what we have, throw it all together. And something would come that I would feel that if I was like in the US with access to, internet and cookbooks and supermarkets where I could buy anything, there'd be this sense of being overwhelmed. And yet when those choices were narrowed down, suddenly the creative possibilities paradoxically became more. And I think that's what we're seeing today in contemporary society, of just how addicted everyone is to their phones and their apps and notifications and everything else, that now this great possibility and opportunity of freedom to learn and to go anywhere actually makes you feel exhausted, and that the simplicity and renunciation of a monastic life narrows down those choices, so that with less you actually have much more when it comes to freedom and creativity.
Exactly what I was thinking just now. I was going to say exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so to wrap up, I mentioned that I had listened to what Melissa had said and put it in these categories of comments that were fitting into this East-West contrast. And the final category that I heard as she was talking was one of culture. And she talked about culture in a number of different ways, but one of the things I liked in how she expressed it was a kind of learning through osmosis, of just being in a physical place and coming in contact with people and places and anecdotes and possibilities, that if you're just there, you see and you learn and you experience. And it reminded me of one of the reasons that I wanted to start sharing stories about Myanmar in the first place. Is I just had these three words that started my reason for wanting to share these stories, and that still animate what I do today. And that's this desire to want to extend the conversation, that there's certain things that you can experience when you're there that you don't when you're not, and there's nowhere else to find them. And just by being in the right place at the right time or meeting the right person, you get these stories, you get this insight, you hear this experience, and then it just kind of shifts things a little bit. And that's the culture that she finds herself in. And while, like no other country, Myanmar is not a perfect place, it's nowhere perfect in samsara, it kind of felt like she was thrown into this petri dish of possibility in such a way that back in US or California it just isn't possible. And not only is it this petri dish of possibility, but she is this eager and willing and humble and open practitioner who is ready to meet those possibilities when she comes and encounters them. And so seeing a person like that landing in a culture where, even with its imperfections, the possibilities for how she engages and learns and grows are there, that match coming from a Westerner being in a traditional Eastern place, that contrast and match together and how well it fit, even with those imperfections, I was very inspired by, and also very, very interested in how those were able to come together and how she described that.
Right. And ultimately, looking at the whole thing, I really do think that the sort of some of the liberal ideas of the West, they would help counter the patriarchal imbalance that we see in monasticism in the East.
Right.
And at the same time, the depth and breadth of what's going on in Myanmar for Dhamma, that's something that I hope and including things like restraint or the idea of restriction to some degree, or demarcation of things, or that there's some value in that, and I think that brings balance to what's going on in the West, or could. I think I think there's some wounding on both sides, and some, how to say it, dangers, or even like pain on both sides that's arising through the way things are manifesting on both ends in very different ways. And I think bringing those together somehow would really be, I think both ends could use some tempering, for lack of a better word. So she's kind of a manifestation of both of those, like it's not just one or the other.
Yeah, and I think it was just really nice to hear an overview of what she did, the different teachers and centers where she went, because we're in the age of COVID where you can listen vicariously and virtually, but you can't actually go and travel. Everything's shut down, travel and countries and airports and even meditation centers and monasteries. So it's just everything takes on a different feel now. So listening vicariously to her spiritual journey, it was kind of reminded me of like one of those virtual museum tours that they're doing online now, where you can sit in your home and follow along what someone does. And once we get this whole thing solved and the world opens up again, we can have those experiences again ourselves. But for the time being, it was nice to just sit back and take in spiritually where someone had traveled, where they'd gone, and follow their trip and be able to appreciate it.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, we'll have more interviews and episodes out soon. So stay tuned for those, and we'll catch you on the next one. Till then, take care.
I'd like to take a moment to describe what our aim was in creating this podcast series. Our motivation is reflected by the in-depth discussions we have with a wide range of guests in 3 categories of related information. First, we hope to educate and motivate listeners in their own practice through the inspiring individual lives of meditators sharing their experiences and perspectives within the Burma Dhamma. Second, we want to help meditators in gaining a deeper understanding of the history of Myanmar, such as its context, culture, and religion, so that they can better appreciate how and where their own practice fits into the Golden Land's rich Dhamma history. We do this through interviews around scholarly works related to Buddhist Burma. And finally, we hope we can help listeners gain a deeper appreciation of the richness of current Burmese Buddhist issues and how Buddha Dhamma has manifested in the Golden Land, which we get through a catch-all category, a potpourri of developments that can help shine a light on modern Myanmar, particularly its Buddhist context. Well, those are our goals, and we hope you found value in this particular show. If so, I want to bring up a general reminder that there is a minimum cost associated with every episode, and we are 100% listener-supported. If you would like to hear more content like the show you just heard now, please take a moment to consider giving a donation to keep our engine running. If you would like to join in our mission to share the Dhamma from the Golden Land more widely, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Every cent goes immediately and directly to sustaining the programming. You can give right on our website via credit card by going to insightmyanmar.org/donation or through PayPal by going to paypal.me/insightmyanmar. We also take donation through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. In all cases, simply search Insight Myanmar on each platform and you'll find our account. Alternatively, you can also visit our website for specific links to any of these respective accounts, or feel free to email us at info@insightmyanmar.org. In all cases, that's Insight Myanmar, one word, spelled INSIGHTMYANMAR. If you would like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you for your kind consideration. You have been listening to the Insight Myanmar podcast. We would appreciate it very much if you would be willing to rate, review, and/or share this podcast. Every little bit of feedback helps. If you are interested, you can subscribe to the Insight Myanmar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, please check out our website for a list of our complete episodes, including additional text, videos, and other information at www.insightmyanmar.org. That's Insight Myanmar, one word, INSIGHTMYANMAR. If you cannot find our feed on your podcast player, please let us know and we will ensure that it can be offered there. There was certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, and we'd like to encourage listeners to keep the discussion going. Make a post, request specific questions, and join in our discussions on the Insight Myanmar podcast Facebook group. You are also most welcome to follow our Facebook and Instagram accounts by the same name of Insight Myanmar. And if you're not on Facebook, you can also message us directly at burmadhamma@gmail.com. That's BURMADHAMMA@gmail.com, and we're also active on Dhamma Wheel. If you'd like to start up a discussion group on another platform, let us know and we can share that forum here. Finally, we're open to suggestions about guests or topics for future episodes, so if you have someone or something in mind, please do be in touch. We would also like to take this time to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, especially our 2 sound engineers, Martin Combs and Tharng A. There's of course Zach Hessler, content collaborator and part-time co-host. Ken Pransky helps with editing. Dragos Pandita and Andre Francois produce original artwork, and a special Mongolian volunteer who is asked to remain anonymous does our social media templates. We'd also like to thank everyone who assisted us in arranging for the guests we have interviewed so far. And of course, we send a big thank you to the guests themselves for agreeing to come and share such powerful personal stories. Finally, we are immensely grateful for the donors who made this entire thing possible. We also remind our listeners that the opinions expressed by our guests are their own and not necessarily reflective of the host or other podcast contributors. Please also note, as we are mainly a volunteer team, we do not have the capacity to fact-check our guest interviews. By virtue of being invited on our show, there is a trust that they will be truthful and not misrepresent themselves or others. If you have any concerns about the statements made on this or other shows, please contact us. This recording is the exclusive right of Insight Myanmar podcast and may not be used without the expressed written permission of the podcast owner, which includes video, audio, written transcripts, and excerpts of any episodes. It is also not meant to be used for commercial purposes. On the other hand, we are very open to collaboration, so if you have a particular idea in mind for sharing any of our podcasts or podcast-related information, please feel free to contact us with your proposal. As you know, our podcasts are 100% listener-supported. We welcome your contribution in any amount, denomination, and transfer method. You may give via Patreon at patreon.com/insightmyanmar, via PayPal at paypal.me/insightmyanmar, or by credit card by going to insightmyanmar.org/donation. In all cases, that's Insight Myanmar, one word, INSIGHTMYANMAR. If you'd like to give especially to support our new run of coronavirus episodes, please go on the GoFundMe site and search Insight Myanmar to find our campaign. If you are in Myanmar and would like to give a cash donation, please feel free to get in touch with us. Thanks, and see you next show.